Hello, welcome to another virtual program with Maine Historical Society. I'm Kathleen Newman. It's December 14th, 2021, and this is Green Acre, an experiment in Eliot, Maine in the 1890s and beyond with Dr. Anne Gordon Perry. And Dr. Perry has a PhD in aesthetic studies and is the primary author of Green Acre on the Piscataqua. She lives near Dallas, Texas with her husband, Tim Perry, and together they actually made a short film that will be included in our program this evening. Anne, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much, Kathleen, and the Maine Historical Society for sponsoring this program with its focus on Sarah Farmer and her experiment at Green Acre. I also wish to thank Roseanne Adams and Fran Pollitt, who created the online exhibit, The Advent of Green Acre, a Bahá'í Center of Learning, as well as the current staff of Green Acre, who serve the property with great intentionality and zeal, and my friend Richard Candy, who's a Portsmouth historian. So now let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this first slide shows this online exhibit, which is through the Maine Memory Network, which is also related to the Historical Society. And you may want to go there and look at all the images and read about it. Also, this is the current Green Acre website, and they invite us to be agents of change. You know, it's a wonderful website you could explore, greenacre.org. And today there's much emphasis at Green Acre on social justice, on racial unity, on gender equality, and concerns related to world peace. There's also an active sequence of artistic exhibits, both online and on ground now. And this is a development that's especially exciting to me. So you can visit the galleries, see videos, and learn about contributing artists. So now for my talk. And if you don't know where Eliot is, here's a map. Do you see this outline of Maine? Eliot, Maine is at the very bottom corner, and it's across the bridge from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So here you see Portsmouth and Kittery, Maine, and then this is Eliot, and here is Green Acre, a Bahá'í Center of Learning. So the history of the Eliot area itself is quite interesting. The banks of the Piscataqua River were home of the Abenaki Indians before settlers came in 1623. In the 1840s and 50s, the Hanscom shipyard, where Green Acre is now located, launched many ships, including the Nightingale, which was named for the singer Jenny Lind. Eliot became known as a center for timber and shipbuilding, and in 1877, Dr. J.L.M. Willis moved to Eliot from New York City to become Eliot's own horse and buggy doctor. So in the short film you'll see later, you'll find out why Sarah Farmer and her parents moved to Eliot. But in any event, in 1887, Sarah took on reviving the Eliot Library Association, raising money by hosting 2 summer fetes with an international flair. A portrait from this time of Sarah with her dog Barry, created in 1891 by Frank Hector Tompkins, now hangs in the Eliot Library in a room dedicated to Sarah. In 1889, Dr. Willis bought the Green Acre property and joined forces with Francis Keefe, Martin Perry Toby, George Hammond, and Sarah Jane Farmer to create a hotel in Eliot. Now, this is the inn. And in 1897, Willis founded the Eliot Historical Society and began to produce and edit volumes of a history called Old Eliot, which is an invaluable tool for Eliot and South Berwick history, containing documented and oral history of the town. In 1903, he acquired the first automobile in Eliot. And in 1907, Dr. J.H.S. Fogg gave the money and land to build the public library there. Sarah was then president of the Library Association and was slated to speak at the dedication, but she had fallen in Boston and she had injured her spine, so she was unable to attend. But on my last visit to the Eliot Library, which was this past summer, I visited the Fogg Homestead, which is a building just directly next to the library and on its property. And over the mantle in that building is a framed copy of Sarah's handwritten notes from the Library Association meeting in 1889. So this is the room today that has the portrait of Sarah. Whoops, I went too soon. But last summer I was able to, at Eliot's bicentenary, I was able to dress like Sarah and go to the library and tell stories there while the public came in. It was quite wonderful. But you can see the then and the now of that room. So one more person is worth mentioning here, and that's Francis Keefe. He was a ward of the Farmer family, and he helped Sarah's farmer Moses with electrical inventions and experiments. He was also engaged to Sarah at one point, and we don't know why, but she never married, despite having a number of suitors. And both Keefe and Willis were library supporters as well as business partners of Sarah. So how did it happen that in the mid-1800s, the small town of Eliot, with a population around 1,500, became a major center for art, music, lectures on evolution and science, education, mysticism, and varieties of religious thought, attracting transcendentalists, yogis, and Buddhists in long robes, artists, musicians, leaders of progressive ideas, society people, and others, diverse in race and ethnic background. So at the center of this cosmopolitan cultural and intellectual hub that arose in Eliot was Sarah Farmer, the daughter of inventor Moses Garish Farmer and humanitarian Hannah Shapleigh Farmer, both of old New England families. Sarah's father, Moses, was considered a genius in the field of electricity. In 1847, he invented the first electric railway car. Thomas Edison was only 12 years old in 1859 when Moses illuminated the farmer's Salem, Massachusetts home with a row of electrical lights. And this was on Sarah's 12th birthday. And here's a picture of Sarah at 12. Sarah's mother, Hannah, was committed to helping such causes as saving the Old North Church in Boston from being torn down and contributing medical supplies during the Civil War. Their home was a way station on the Underground Railroad, and Sarah grew up around people such as Sojourner Truth, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Harriet Tubman, Julia Ward Howe, and John Greenleaf Whittier. So these associations contributed to her lifelong passion to promote tolerance, peace, freedom, and equality. So fast forward to their time in Eliot, the hotel venture Sarah was part of featured the Inn, a beautiful example of turn-of-the-century Victorian architecture, and an expansive property which included numerous buildings, fields, groves of trees, and a spectacular view of the Piscataqua River. When the hotel did not succeed as an economic venture, Sarah convinced her business partners to allow her to establish the Green Acre Conferences. And this was a summer forum for cultural and intercultural exchange. And she also created the Montsalvat School for the comparative study of religions. So soon Green Acre became a summer destination for artists, writers, and social activists. In 1893, Sarah met the Hindu Swami Vivekananda and the Buddhist teacher Dharamapala at the World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, and invited them and others to Green Acre to extend the interests of the Parliament. There's Vivekananda. Sarah was passionate about her work in the field of social improvement, and the Green Acre Institute became the precursor of the adult education and summer school movement. She was excited about the transforming aspects of a new world, eager to put any new knowledge to the test of the practical arena, hoping to achieve collective peace in her lifetime, and envisioning a school that would attract students from all parts of the planet and would offer a sustainable foundation with agriculture and kindergarten studies, as well as graduate school. She weathered the ups and downs of her own fortunes with grace, but there were times of great difficulty and disappointment. And at the end of her life, for various reasons, she probably felt her experiment and her grand undertakings were a failure. But this is a quote from her from back in those days. My aim was to restore the ideal to the human mind, to demonstrate that it is possible to live in the kingdom of heaven now. By attempting to bring together representatives of all races and various beliefs, it is hoped to make manifest the converging movement of thought, affecting all faithful people. Green Acre was created to nurture neglected children to become fit for adoption, provide education in arts and crafts, reflecting the principles of true art and the power of music, establish cooperative farms, a university with a temple in its midst for men and women who have become conscious of the great power through which the whole creation moves. We wish to establish a home, heart's ease, for the cure of diseases of mind or body. In time, we hope to see such a center as Green Acre in every land, a rallying point for all who desire to forget self and rise to the plane of universal consciousness. So the present circumstance does not fulfill the vision. And I think she would still say that. And yet there's been so much progress. But you can see that she truly envisioned a holistic center that would be multiplied around the world that would cure all of humanity's ills. In 1894, at the dedication of the conferences, Sarah raised the first known peace flag, which was a 36-foot long banner with the word peace in green letters against a white background, flying on an 85-foot flagpole made up of two ship's masts. So here's the peace flag. You can see it underneath the American flag. And these pictures are actually from the 1920s. So the flag, that original flag, was flown for quite a while. And although Green Acre had to be reached by boat, carriage, or bicycle until the electric trolley and automobile made it more accessible, sometimes as many as 1,000 people came for lectures in its big tent. In 1895, the steamer Queen City began regular service to Green Acre from Portsmouth. By 1897, Green Acre had become a renowned center for the advancement of progressive ideas, a universal platform dedicated to peace. Of course, a fascinating array of people came to Green Acre during its early decades. One visitor was a German physician who advocated early morning dew walks, and nearby farmers hid behind the stone walls to watch the ladies scandalously lift their skirts to their ankles to partake in this activity. One guest lived in a treehouse and ate only fruit and nuts. A number of people from Asian countries signed Sarah Farmer's autograph albums during the first years of the conferences. And one of these was a famous Japanese artist, Taikan Yokoyama, an important leader in the Nihonga school of modern Japanese art. The Montsalvat school, as Sarah noted, brought the Orient and Occident into close sympathetic touch. The Green Acre conferences attracted the support of social and cultural figures such as Edward Hale, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Jane Addams, Phoebe Hearst, Edwin Ginn, and Clarence Darrow, defense attorney in the Scopes evolution trial. In 1902, the first electric car ran from Kittery to Green Acre on the 55th anniversary of Moses's invention of the first electric railway car. Until 1924, electric trolleys ran daily from Dover to York, including stops at Green Acre. In 1903, an article in the Boston Sunday Journal reported, years ago, intellectual Boston would have gone out to Concord for spiritual regeneration at the feet of the good, sweet poets and philosophers who lived there. Today, the inner circle of intellectual Boston goes to Green Acre to sit at the feet of the gentle and wonderful prophetess priestess, Sarah J. Farmer. The Green Acre conferences became so popular that the inn overflowed and tents were set up to house the guests. The programs included topics such as peace, education, evolution, nature, sociology, art, child study, psychology, comparative religion, and more. Speakers included Swami Vivekananda, Image Gulasian of Armenia, actor Joseph Jefferson, Swami Abhadananda, philosopher Charles Malloy, writer Ralph Waldo Trine, publisher Charles Brodie Patterson, and artist author Wesley Dow. Sarah traveled throughout North America and Europe to invite prominent writers, philosophers, musicians, performers, social activists, and religious leaders to lecture at the summer sessions. So this shows the tent village in front of the inn and the peace flag, which was on a very tall flagpole, which you can see. Interestingly, she also had 3 other shorter flagpoles, and they often hoisted the flags of the countries that ships were coming into the Portsmouth harbor. So they would fly the flags of these countries to welcome the various ships, which I thought was a wonderful, very internationally minded idea. As the progressive ideals of freedom and equality permeated the American society, Sarah advocated for the equality of women, universal education, international arbitration, economic opportunity for all, and a complete end to religious and racial prejudice. Her forums on evolution and other controversial subjects sparked debate, but she insisted that all listen with an unbiased mind to any idea expressed. She traveled throughout North America as well as Europe and invited prominent writers and social activists, etc. And in January 1900, she left on a cruise with some friends going to Egypt, and it included a visit to Akka, which was in Palestine at the time, now Israel. So there she met Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the Baha'i founder, Baha'u'llah, and the person who was who ministered the affairs of the Baha'i community following Baha'u'llah's death in 1892. So there's an interesting story about Sarah when she arrived. She had written questions to ask Abdu'l-Baha down and had put these questions in her Bible, but she was summoned so early the next morning that she forgot her questions. And when she met with Abdu'l-Baha, he began answering her questions one at a time without being asked. And this surprised the interpreter who was translating for him because no questions were asked. And Sarah was confirmed in her vision of Green Acre, and it was a very emotional experience for her. So she returned to Green Acre and proclaimed the Baha'i faith on the 1901 program cover with a quotation from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, which read, "Good tidings to you, good tidings, awake, awake." And some felt Sarah had turned her back on her own inclusive spirit by accepting the Baha'i faith, yet in doing so, she further embraced the ideals of the oneness of humankind and the progressive nature of religion. So Green Acre continued to be a leading center for the transcendentalists and a movement called New Thought, as well as a place where society folks and artists and social reformers and others could gather under her leadership. Morning meditation meetings were often followed by a dizzying array of lectures. Sorry, I went too soon. There's one account that talks about 17 lectures in a single day. So Sarah's spirit in her stronger years did much to lead people to a broadly tolerant way of thinking. Green Acre stood for the constructive spirit. And then in 1905, the Green Acre peace flag was conspicuously visible from the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard when the Japanese and Russian delegates met to end the Russo-Japanese War at the invitation of President Theodore Roosevelt. So after a month of contentious negotiation, during which time citizens helped in the peace process by hosting receptions and making friends of the delegates, which is now referred to as multi-track diplomacy, the treaty was announced, and Sarah invited both delegations to Green Acre. The Russians had other plans that day, but the Japanese envoys came on August 31st for a rousing program on peace. And then on September 5th, 1905, though hidden from view, Sarah was the only woman to observe the signing of the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. She received a pass into the shipyard, but was not allowed to go into the building where the signing was to take place. Now, you have to remember, she was quite famous in those days and famous for her peacemaking efforts. But because she was not one of the invited guests, and they were all men, she was not included in this ceremony. So, a very kind man named Alfonso Staples, who was from Eliot and worked at the naval shipyard as an engineer, invited her to come into his building, which was adjacent to the building where the signing took place. And she stood on a table underneath a transom window, and she could see the men from across the way around the table. And later, a newspaper article published the report that shared her own feelings. And it said, "The candle across the way," Miss Farmer said, "throughout its cheering message, and with a feeling at my heart deeper than any words can convey, I said softly to myself, how far that little candle throws its beams. And I breathed a prayer that this time might be the last, that a peace treaty would need to be made to end a war between men who should be brothers." So it was her hope that this treaty would end all war. And of course, we know that did not happen. And we are still in that process of humanity needing to grow up and out of warfare. So, but she must have been thrilled to see the signing of the treaty. From women's rights to religious tolerance, Sarah Farmer's work epitomized the progressive forces welling up in America between 1890 and 1910. Those who came to Green Acre often came seeking solutions to timely issues, as well as compelling and informative cultural and spiritual connections, and artistic as well. In 1912, Abdul Baha came to Green Acre for a week and further elaborated on the role it would play in the future. He and Sarah drove together around the country roads of Eliot, he pointing out sites that would have significance at a future time and commending her on her vision. There they are in the motor car. Sarah died in 1916 and is buried in a small cemetery behind her home in Eliot called Bittersweet. The writer Horace Holly succinctly summed up Sarah's place in American history. He said, "A consecrated pioneer to make a definite and practical application of ideals hitherto existing only in the minds of philosophers and the lives of saints, Miss Farmer can be considered as the feminine counterpart of Ralph Waldo Emerson, for she possessed his idealism to the full, but her nature was executive, practical, and intensely human, desiring tangible results above abstract formulas and definitions. Green Acre consequently arose as the effort to live out and apply the great American vision of truth, justice, and righteousness, and has never lost sight of that essential purpose." Green Acre came under the auspices of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States in 1926, and books and videos have documented significant aspects of its past and present. Numerous presenters, known and relatively unknown, have given talks, musical performances, and artistic programs over the years, among them actors Carol Lombard and Rainn Wilson. Famed trumpet player Dizzy Gillespie made at least 2 visits to Green Acre and played his trumpet at the nearby grave of Louis Gregory, an African-American lawyer and early Baha'i. Today, Green Acre, a Bahá'í Center of Learning, serves as a gathering and reflection place for everyone dedicated to the spiritual and material well-being of their community, and offers discourse on vital issues facing humanity at the level of family, neighborhood, and community. It still attracts diversity of all kinds, fostering dialogue on race unity, on equality of men and women, on the crucial and necessary components to develop and maintain peace. Green Acre creates an environment where individuals and families are empowered to learn to transform themselves and their community by translating ideals into action through its meaningful conversations, programs, and exhibitions. New buildings have added additional conference and housing facilities. Older buildings have been restored as historic edifices. I hope you all get to visit one day. And the trolley station that was once at its entrance, I don't have the picture right here, but at any rate, the old trolley station, you saw it earlier. The trolley station was moved for some decades and now is back at the entrance of Green Acre. But I'm sorry, I don't have the picture. You're going to have to go and see it for yourself. It's a wonderful little structure that's been restored. And of course, the peace flag, a smaller version of the peace flag, it still flies there. And it's at the center of a peace garden dedicated to the oneness of humanity. And there's part of the garden. And the Green Acre Inn has been renamed the Sarah Farmer Inn. So in the town of Eliot, now with a population of around 6,000, Sarah Farmer's hopes and ideals remain alive, connecting those who experience them to the past, the present, and the future. So her experiment has created a lasting legacy. So now you're going to see a 10-minute film that Tim, my husband, and I put together, and some of the material I just now shared may be repeated, but in a slightly different way, and you'll see better versions of the photographs and some video and so forth. So Tim, you want to roll the movie? On the banks of the Piscataqua River in Eliot, Maine, stands an historic edifice. Built as a resort hotel in 1899, the Green Acre Inn became the site for international conferences focused on peace, racial unity, gender equality, and other progressive ideals. Who was its founder? What did she believe? Why is she associated with peace? And why was the inn eventually named after her? Sarah Farmer was the daughter of transcendentalists sympathetic to people living in bondage and experiencing oppression. Their home in Dover, New Hampshire became a way station on the Underground Railroad. Friends included reformers such as Sojourner Truth and Harriet Beecher Stowe, both of whom came to their home to visit, as well as Harriet Tubman, Julia Ward Howe, and other progressive leaders. Moses Farmer was an inventor who pioneered in the telegraph field and created the fire alarm system. He also constructed the technology for an electromagnetic locomotive. Hannah Farmer was a philanthropist who helped save the Old North Church in Boston from being torn down. During the Civil War, she sent supplies to Southern hospitals. In Eliot, she created Rosemary Cottage, a summer retreat for poor mothers and their children from Boston. When Sarah was 1, they moved to Salem, Massachusetts, where Moses was appointed operator in the Salem Telegraph Office. When Sarah was 12, Moses lit up their parlor with a row of incandescent lights, the first time electricity had been used to provide lighting. Thomas Edison was only 12 then. Sarah spent her teen years in Salem. She was smart and well-liked, and at graduation served as the valedictorian of her high school. In 1872, when Sarah was 25, her family moved from Salem to Newport, Rhode Island, where Moses served as a professor of electrical science and a consultant to the U.S. Navy. But Moses became seriously ill, and Sarah's health was poor. They decided to move to Eliot, Maine, Hannah's family home, to enjoy the benefits of country living. Sarah found herself caring for both parents and had what was then called a nervous collapse, then benefited by the popular cure of an extended trip to Europe. On the ship, Sarah had an image of herself as vain and selfish. She vowed to devote the rest of her life to service. At home, Sarah revived the Eliot Library Association and organized evenings of discussions on literature. She spoke in churches and other venues to raise library funds. The poet John Greenleaf Whittier was a family friend, and she persuaded him to donate an entire collection of books. Today, over the mantel in a room of Eliot's William Fogg Library, hangs a beautiful portrait of Sarah and her dog Barry. In 1889, 4 men formed the Eliot Hotel Company to build a resort hotel in Eliot. On March 1, 1890, Sarah signed an agreement to become the 5th partner of the venture. In 1891, Hannah died. To distract her mind from her troubles, Sarah attended lectures in Boston. One day in June 1892, she had a vision of Green Acre as a place where various philosophies and religions could find expression. In March 1893, Moses and Sarah went to Chicago to exhibit some of his inventions at the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the Chicago World's Fair. Moses exhibited his light bulb and electric car at the fair, but became ill with pneumonia and died there. Sarah, deep in grief, returned to Eliot. A few months later, a Parliament of the World's Religions was held in Chicago as part of the Columbian Exposition. Sarah returned to Chicago just after the closing of the Parliament. She met with its organizer and invited Vivekananda, a Hindu from Calcutta, and Dharamapala, a Buddhist from Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to speak at Green Acre. That following summer, in 1894, Sarah dedicated Green Acre to the ideals of peace and religious unity. Then she had the first known peace flag in the world raised and explained, "In looking for an emblem, we wanted something that would be a call to everybody and fit everybody, and we felt that the message that had been brought to the world by prophet after prophet was the message of peace. So we've put on a large banner over our heads, peace." The peace flag was 36 feet long with green letters on a white background. It hung on an 85-foot pole created from 2 ships' masts tied together. During the next decade, Green Acre and Sarah became known in many circles. Educators and social reformers came to exchange views. By 1897, Green Acre was much publicized in the United States and known around the world. Discussion topics were quite advanced. Evolution was a hot topic, and participants at Green Acre often took a progressive look at the debate over it. Race, too, was a subject that provoked divisions, yet Sarah supported social advancement with a Work in Education project where African American families from the South spent time in Maine. People of color were invited to lecture, the most prominent of whom were George Washington Carver and W.E.B. Du Bois. In 1903, an article in the Boston Sunday Journal reported, "Years ago, intellectual Boston would have gone out to Concord for spiritual regeneration. Today, the inner circle of intellectual Boston goes to Green Acre." Despite favorable activities and development, there were difficulties. Many wondered if she should be in charge of the programs and operations. Financial difficulties prevailed. Distraught, Sarah left for a cruise with her friend Mariah Wilson. On January 3, 1900, they boarded a ship bound for the Mediterranean, joining 2 old friends who were going to Akka, Palestine, now Israel, to visit Abdul-Baha, the son of the prophet founder of the Bahá'í faith, Baha'u'llah. There, Abdul-Baha confirmed her vision for Green Acre, and she felt she had found a path representing universal truths. In 1904, a war raged between Russia and Japan, but peace continued to be promoted at Green Acre. The following year, Portsmouth, New Hampshire was chosen as a site of negotiations for a treaty to end the war. President Theodore Roosevelt invited delegates from Russia and Japan to consult at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, only a few miles from Green Acre. The delegates could see Sarah's peace flag flying from where they met. Finally, the news that a peace treaty was to be signed was announced. Sarah invited the peace delegates and President Roosevelt to Green Acre for a special victory celebration. Roosevelt sent a letter of regret, and the Russian diplomat Vita also declined on behalf of his entourage, but the Japanese peace envoys came. On September 5, 1905, the day of the signing of the treaty, Sarah went to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. Because she was well known and respected, she was given a pass into the shipyard. All of the invited guests were men who held important positions. Sarah asked to witness the signing of the treaty. She was not allowed to do so. But an Eliot man by the name of Alfonso Staples saw her and invited her up to his office in the adjacent building, where he pushed a table up to the window and had her stand on it and look across to the room where the envoys were to sign the peace treaty. In a newspaper account in 1905, Sarah is quoted, "The candle across the way threw out its cheering message, and with a feeling at my heart deeper than any words can convey, I said softly to myself, 'How far that little candle throws its beams,' and I breathed a prayer that this time might be the last, that a peace treaty would need to be made to end a war between men who should be brothers." In 1912, Abdu'l-Bahá came to Green Acre for a week as part of an 8-month journey across America. He and Sarah visited the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and again he confirmed her vision of her beloved Green Acre. Green Acre has evolved over the years and exists today as a beacon of hope and progress for many. Abdu'l-Bahá predicted that Sarah Farmer would in the future be seen as the envy of the queens of all regions and the rival of all the celebrated people of the world. And perhaps, as both of them envisioned, the world will establish a lasting and sustainable peace. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, Anne. That was great. The talk was great. Film was wonderful. And we're getting a lot of questions from the audience too. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can. Can you tell us, after Sarah died, who took over like the administration of Green Acre?
It's kind of a complex question because there was controversy. Before she died, she was taken to a sanatorium. Some people wanted to get rid of her so that Green Acre could, a number of people wanted Green Acre. You know, the society people wanted to keep it as a beautiful hotel. The artists wanted to have it as a place for art and music. The transcendentalists were interested in it. The Vivekananda followers were, everybody had a stake in Green Acre. And so there was actually a lawsuit, and Sarah was conveniently put away for a few years, but she did come back to Green Acre at the end of her life. First when Abdu'l-Bahá was there, and then in 1916, she came out and a few months later died and was buried behind her house. In the meantime, the Baha'is there knew that she wanted this property to stay within the auspices of the faith. And so they won the court case. And then eventually, so there was a transition period, but Harry Randall was one of the people that was instrumental in administering Green Acre during that time between her death in 1916 and 1926, when the National Assembly took on the ownership of it.
Are any of her family members still involved with the organization?
Not that I know of. Roseanne Adams may be the person. She's actually related to the Shapleigh branch of Sarah's family. And I know that Sarah had one relative, a cousin or something, that Sally Coffin but it's been a while. So I don't really know about current family members. And I live in Texas, so I'm not there to
Right, right.
meet, you know.
Sure.
But ask Roseanne, she's a great historian and archivist.
What about Sarah's papers, her correspondence? Does that exist anywhere? Is it in a place where researchers can access it?
Well, it's a great question. And in 1904, a really tragic thing happened in that her house, Bittersweet, burned down. And Sarah was in Georgia at the time. And apparently the a candle started the fire and the house was burned down, burning all of her own papers and her father's invention papers.
No.
So tragically, we lost a lot. And who knows what was in those? I saw another question was about, did she write poetry? I
Right.
don't know. I'm sure she collected a lot of quotations and she must have written a lot because someone described her bed as having a lot of books and papers on it, and she didn't want things disturbed. She was very attentive to her letter writing. And in the archives of people like Emma Thursby and some others, some of her letters have been found. So I'm not the expert on that, but Jonathan Menon is compiling a biography about Sarah. And I think he's done a more exhaustive research search for her letters. And I just have a few quotations from her, and that's all.
Sure. So how did she afford the running of Green Acre? I know you mentioned at some point that money was tight or that they experienced financial difficulties, but where did the funding come from?
Well, she inherited her family's money and she put everything she had into the property and into running it. She also had the philosophy that anyone should be able to come, even if they couldn't afford it. And so often people came who didn't have any money at all or very little. And sometimes things were stolen from the inn. One time the plumbing was stolen because, some people were resistant to some of the progressive ideas that she represented. And so it was a hard time, and she wasn't a very practical business person. And
Mm,
that's another reason people were kind of critical. I mean, you can imagine a lone single woman whose
yeah,
parents had died, and who was trying to maintain this visionary, idealistic place, and then wasn't very good at running the business. So people took advantage of her, and some people were critical of her leadership and so forth. But she did her best.
now do you know, were there any spiritualists involved with Green Acre?
Um, I know that Sarah's mother was interested in spiritualism. A lot of people were at that time, and I don't know specifically, but when Abdul Baha came in 1912, he did refer to people with superstitious beliefs. So I'm not quite sure how he defined that, but he
Right.
felt like he was removing some of the cobwebs of some of the beliefs that were a little far-fetched. Um, but generally, any idea was welcomed, and a lot of people were excited about spirituality
Mhm.
and learning about Eastern religion and so forth.
Someone's asking, how did you become interested in this topic?
Well, I was a fairly new Baha'i living in Colorado, and I read an article about Sarah Farmer and Green Acre in the East West Journal. And my heart started pounding. And I said, immediately, I said, I have to go there. So that summer, I went. And I actually married the man who had written that article. The marriage didn't last, but this book was one of the products from the research that came out of the connection I had with Bob Atkinson, who lives in Maine and still has high hopes for Green Acre. I mean, he's still very actively interested in the especially the educational aspect of Green Acre. So I don't know. It was like Sarah tapped me on the shoulder or something. And in 2005, 100 years after the peace treaty, I auditioned to portray Sarah Farmer in the Chautauqua programs in New Hampshire. And so I got to do that. And she, was there with Teddy Roosevelt and Ida B. Wells and
Mhm.
Thomas Edison and other people. So I kind of feel like an imposter because she was so pure and visionary, and I'm a poor substitute for her presence. But
But you're bringing to life a story that, I mean, she's not a Mainer or person that you often hear about in Maine history. I know I've learned a lot from this program and from the film, and it's really nice to see that getting some attention.
yes, and in her day, she was much more well known than she is today. And I've written a children's book about her that I'm hoping will be published. But in her day, the newspapers in all the major cities were publishing, um, you know, programs, yeah, things about the programs at Green Acre and about Sarah. And so she was quite well known, and we need to revive the interest, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. Someone's asking, will folks have access to this presentation later? So this is being recorded and it will be available on um mainhistory.org on our website. It usually takes like a week or two to get these programs edited and properly and posted. So it may not be with the holiday season, it may not be till after the new year, but we'll get it up as quickly as we can. So visit our website. That's where you'll be able to see this program and all of our other recorded programs. And I know Dr. Perry mentioned Maine Memory Network earlier. So if you want to see the online exhibit about Sarah Farmer and Green Acre, that website is mainmemory.net. Someone's asking, how was it that Sarah was placed into a sanatorium? How was she able to get out?
Well, initially, friends placed her in a sanatorium in Massachusetts, and she had a guardian who handled her affairs, and then she was moved to one in Portsmouth. And there was a famous doctor who was doing electric shock therapy and things, and for him, Sarah Farmer was an important patient because she was so well known. He did not want her to leave, and at one point, some well-meaning friends kidnapped her and took her across the border and tried to get her out of there, but she was returned. And Abdul Baha said, she needs to get out, but in a legal way. And when he was asked if she was insane, he said, she does not have insanity, but exaltation. She was spiritually very alive. And so she was very attached to him. And when he came, she was thrilled. So eventually, um, permission was granted to move her back into her home, and it was again only a few months before she died. So I don't know all the details of that, and I know Mark Stables is putting some wonderful things in the chat about things I don't know about related to Green Acre history.
Right. So yeah, certainly there's history about this place that goes back further than when, Green Acre was there. And there may be some things folks that may have questions about aspects of this story or that location that go beyond the scope of the program this evening. So Maine Historical Society, always a great place to find answers to your historical questions. So I was just telling Mark in the chat, but really anybody, feel free to email me at kneumann@mainhistory.org if you're looking for help with more research or get answers to questions that maybe we just can't answer in this moment this evening. I'm happy to put you in touch with the folks in our research library, or with other folks in Maine who might be able to help you find the answers to your questions.
And actually, Mark's points are interesting to me because it reminds me of how big the history is and how anyone who embarks on research kind of gets a grasp of part of the big puzzle of the whole question of what happened on this land and when. And I've heard something about the Scarlet Letter, but I really don't have the resource. I don't have the material to read about it, so I'd
Sure.
love to, if Mark wants to share that sometime and learn more about the complicated, interesting history of the property and all kind of things.
So it sounds like too this that Green Acre is still doing a lot of what it did when Sarah Farmer was there and when it was originally founded. Is that, can you tell us a little bit more about the work there today?
Well, certainly the pandemic has made it in a function a little bit differently. So there's a lot of online programs now. And as I mentioned, I'm really excited about the arts and the exhibits, and their focus really is on promoting the oneness of humanity and healing racism and helping to change people's hearts. I mean, helping to, you know, bring about the conditions that peace requires. And there's a lot of hope for humankind in the Baha'i revelation, that not just that peace is possible, but that peace is inevitable. And so Baha'is generally are working toward this and having a lot of success in creating healthier neighborhoods but of course there's large issues to consider, such as climate change and lots of other things. So at Green Acre, I mean, it's like a place where it's still very committed to progressive subjects and um, positive interaction and welcoming people. So, I invite you to go to their website, and they have put some fantastic programs together. And we were able to go there this summer. It wasn't really open yet, but we did some filming there for a new film that we're working on that's about Abdul Baha in France. And so we shot some scenes there and renewed our connection with some of the people. And of course, it's a beautiful area, the seacoast area. And I wish I was there all the time. I am in spirit.
So where else can people go if they want to learn more? Certainly there's still Green Acre. Where else, if people are doing research on Sarah or on the Baha'i or on this, the history of this place in Eliot, Maine, where do you recommend they go? What are some resources they should use?
Well, Baha'i.org is one website that's a general Baha'i website, but I think connecting with individuals is a good idea. Like Roseanne and Eliot
Mhm.
is really receptive to questions, and she's a treasure there. And I know Fran Pollitt has a lot of knowledge too. So if you connect with some of these people, I'm happy. Kathleen can forward an email to me if you're interested in a particular topic or helping to educate me on more of what the history encompasses. So that's what I can suggest. I think sometimes personal connection. And then I'm very excited about this book that Jonathan Menon will eventually publish, and it will have a lot more information and facts than what I've discovered, certainly.
Well, thank you again so much for being here, for sharing your time and your expertise with us this evening. This was a really great program. This is a really nice time of year to talk about peace and peace on earth and cooperation and people taking care of each other. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing this story with us. And thank you to our audience for being here too.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I might just mention this book, Green
Please.
Acre on the Piscataqua, is available through Amazon or through the Baha'i distribution service. But also, I've written a book for kids. It's called Unseen Witness, Sarah Farmer and the Portsmouth Peace Treaty. But actually, it's for adults and for teachers as well, because it has in the back, it has a lot of specific information about the treaty and the signing. And if I think we have a few more minutes, right? Would you like to hear a kind of thrilling
Yes,
story?
please. Yeah.
Well, when doing research is sometimes a hard and unpredictable process. So for about 12 years, I was searching for the proof that Sarah observed the treaty signing.
Yes.
And I found a little diary excerpt that talked about, her seeing it through a window. And then in the Portsmouth Herald, there had been some reference in 1966 that she had seen it. And in her own autograph book, a man had written, to Sarah Farmer, who witnessed the signing of the treaty. But the historians of Portsmouth, when they were compiling information, none of these things added up to enough proof for them. Someone's diary, some,
Seems kind of anecdotal or
newspaper years later.
Yeah.
Well, so I was working on this book and I was just about to go to press with it. And through Facebook, an article was posted from a man. Now, let me think of his name. In South Berwick, that does a lot of historical research, and had a scrapbook from Dr. Willis, from that original doctor. And he had posted this article from 1905 that, here, I'll show you the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Farmer, only woman to see Russo-Japanese treaty. And it described how Alfonso Staples invited her to see it through the window. And then it all made sense. But literally, I was searching for 12 or 13 years.
Wow.
And Rick, let me see if his name is here. But at any rate, he's still posting wonderful historic things about South Berwick online. So a friend of mine, he was not my Facebook friend, but someone had forwarded it to me and I was flabbergasted. So I was able to put it in there. And then when I met him that summer, I knelt in front of him and his wife said, well, I've never done that. But that's how excited I was to have gotten
that like the final piece of the puzzle. Yeah. That's fantastic.
To have gotten the proof. And to me, that was enough proof. It was
and it's just, I think it's a reminder, like sometimes we just don't know, like the history that's hiding in, like in our attics or shoe boxes or, things that people have kind of stashed away that our grandparents and great grandparents have held on to. Sometimes you never know where you might find what you're looking for. Someone's asking, what's the name of that book again? Could you tell us the title again?
This one is Unseen Witness, Sarah Farmer and the Portsmouth Peace Treaty, and it's also available on Amazon.
That's great.
But you're right. I mean, there's so many mysteries about the past, but somehow the past, the present, and the future are all intertwined, and there's this wonderful intersection, especially through research. And I wish we had, we were able to time travel, but in lieu of that.
Right. Having those primary sources, those are the next best thing.
Right.
Well, thank you again. And this was really wonderful. I hope we'll see you back with us again soon. Hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person soon. If you're ever back in Maine, we'd love to have you at Maine Historical Society. And just thank you again so much. This was great.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And thank you all for coming.
It was our pleasure. Thank you, everybody. And have a good evening. Hope we'll see you back here soon.